2023 was a huge year for fantastic games, and IGN awarded 83 games a review score of 8 or higher, of which there were 5 10s, including Baldur's Gate 3 and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. As we approach the run-up to the holidays when a ton of new games are coming out, we're taking a look back at the best games of 2024 so far. And while this year might not have hit the highs of 2023, there are still a load of killer games you should really check out. First up, let's look at every game that scored an 8, starting with Night Springs is the first DLC for Alan Wake 2, and is a compact collection of standalone stories that veer from entertainingly violent shootouts to tense stretches of survival horror, before settling on and reveling in the utterly batshit craziness that makes Remedy's multiverse of madness so keenly absorbing to explore. There's admittedly not much new here from a gameplay perspective, and it feels like a bit of a tease to play as a version of Control's heroine stripped of her special abilities in the second episode. But the highs felt during the short return to Alan Wake's universe greatly outweighed the lows, and we'll gladly play through another collection of bite-sized side stories if Remedy ever decided to bake another batch.
He needed me, now and forever. After all, I am his #1 fan.
Another Crab's Treasure is one of our favourite Souls-likes in quite some time. It borrows a lot from the usual genre playbook, but adds a colourful, irresistibly charming and wholly unique veneer that makes it all feel brand spanking new. The story is well written, and filled with memorable moments and characters. The shell swapping mechanic is unique and adorable as heck, and the unrelentingly cheerful mood is like finding land after years adrift in an angsty sea of bloodborne imitators. Its combat isn't the deepest, and it has a bit of jank here and there, but Another Crab's Treasure is so clever and wonderfully ridiculous that it's absolutely worth your time.
Go away! No one's home!
Sir, please open up.
Although Black Myth Wukong isn't a Souls-like, it's still hard as nails. It's a great action game too, despite some technical black marks and localization issues around launch. Combat is fantastic thanks to a great balance of careful resource management and lightning-fast switch reaction gameplay that will test your skills as much as Elden Ring ever has, despite being a more traditional action game than From Software's styles. There are a ton of exciting boss battles, a great variety of enemies, and the world they inhabit is an absolute treat for the eyes and ears. Its story has its moments, but relies a bit too much on having prior knowledge of the events of Journey to the West, and it really could have used a map to make its rewarding exploration measure up to the strength of its combat. That said, its strengths more than carry it through, making Black Myth Wukong a great action game.
Come at me, all of you.
Botany Manor is a light-hearted first-person puzzler, set against a charming Old English backdrop. Figuring out how to grow fantastical plants will keep you on your toes, and the blossoming flora painting onto the pages of the herbarium with bright colours provides a comforting sense of achievement. Deciphering its puzzles is more interesting than reading the notes and letters that make up its fairly one-note story, but the variety of surreal seeds, with unique traits in each new area, gives an exciting cadence to the somewhat repetitive act of tracking down clues. Botany Manor is a laid-back game that doesn't ask you to do too much. Simply grow some strange plants and decompress, and sometimes that's exactly what you need. Here's hoping Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is better than last year's travesty Modern Warfare 3. But in the meantime, it's tough to think of a mobile game that comes as close to giving the full-scale multiplayer experience as Call of Duty Warzone Mobile does. It's Warzone exactly as you know it, and while the touch controls might have you at a disadvantage to anybody using a proper controller, and your phone might struggle to maintain the frame rate and textures smoothly enough if it isn't the latest and greatest, Warzone Mobile excellently uses maps and gameplay elements to provide a fast and fun battle royale experience. If you're already into Warzone, cross-progression makes it feel like an extension of the game you already like, with more opportunities to play it more often. Capes is a clever and challenging tactics game with a clear love of the superhero comics that inspired it. Watching the action figure-like characters combine powers and supercharge diverse ultimate abilities sells the game's focus on teamwork well, and chasing optional objectives in each mission gives you a lot to think about to counter a wide range of enemy types. Stealth missions don't work quite as well, but thankfully they're mostly optional, and the story, heroes, and villains are entertainingly written to make sure it remains fun throughout its substantial campaign.
A+ entrance, everybody.
Even though Deep Rock Galactic Survivor is in early access, and as such only has a limited number of modes and maps, it doesn't feel unpolished or annoying to play, translating the adventurous party game spirit of its shooter big brother to a single-player roguelite about as well as anyone could have. It's an enjoyable addition to the beloved franchise, whether it's first-person or top-down. Wielding a small arsenal of wonderful, punchy weapons as you sprint through critter-filled caverns on a murderous quest for loot and glory is enough to warm the stoniest heart. Yeah, we know Disney Dreamlight Valley was in early access for a while, but it only got a full release at the end of last year. It's a great cozy game with cartoonish and colourful areas to explore, and loads of charming characters to meet. Hanging out with a growing roster of Disney icons is a remarkably good time, and recent additions like Gaston make returning to the valley an even more worthwhile adventure. A lot of the shortcomings from early access days haven't necessarily improved much, including its habit of leaving stories on a cliffhanger ending, a monstrous grind that doesn't quite quit, and bugs that continue to plague an otherwise good time. But there's something undeniably riveting about chilling with Disney's goofy oddballs and lovable tunes. Shifting gears from cute and cozy to cult classic, Dragon's Dogma 2 is a retelling and re-implementation of all of the wonderful ideas from the 2012 much-loved original, including an awesome dynamic world and some of the best combat in the genre. True, the ally AI is a bit finicky, the climbing can be clunky, and the frame rate is occasionally choppy. But this action RPG is so richly rewarding and incomparable to its contemporaries that it's easy to overlook its shortcomings.
At last, we may celebrate the coming of our rightful ruler.
Sticking with fantasy, Enshrouded is the perfect match for anyone who's ever wanted to build a castle in a fantastical world full of danger, and it makes building fun and easy thanks to its intuitive set of tools. But even if you don't care that much about crafting, Enshrouded's RPG systems are solid enough to carry you through its open world for a few dozen hours. Even if its vague story isn't all that powerful, its puzzles forgettable, and its combat and movement system in need of some fine-tuning, thankfully, there's usually no pressure to do anything but try to unlock the next visually breathtaking area. And that makes for a smooth 60-hour plus journey. Expeditions is a satisfying and worthwhile twist on the Mudrunner experience, and its untamed wilderness maps and huge truckload of exploration-focused missions make it a very worthwhile complementary experience to SnowRunner. Despite some aggravating mission gating and a bit of an unfriendly map screen, its unique brand of slow-paced bushwhacking won't ever be for everybody. But successfully taking a truck on a trek through terrain that the toughest trailblazers would fear to tread is still an oddly satisfying challenge that proves the journey is always more important than the destination.
F1 is back, ladies and gentlemen, and the grid is set to grow.
This is the third in the F1 Manager series, and although F1 Manager 2024 doesn't completely escape the pitfalls that comes with being an annual series, it's still a welcome addition thanks to evolutionary changes. New features like creating your own team offer strong customization options, and securing victories with a tailor-made team feels even sweeter than building upon an existing one. Several flaws like the tedious contract system and sprint format could use further work, but this is still Frontier's best take on a Formula One management sim yet. The The latest Final Fantasy XIV expansion, Dawntrail, had some growing pains and notable lulls as it establishes a new era for the series, but the compelling cultures of the Toril region are strong enough to carry it to its greater moments. Although the main story takes a while to get going, once it hits its peak, it's up there with the best this series has ever been. And Dawntrail will leave fans floored by its unique sense of self-reflection and stunned by spectacular combat encounters. It's a worthy extension of Final Fantasy XIV, and leaves a world of fascinating possibilities for the future. But importantly, Dawntrail doesn't forget that it's a Final Fantasy story, and the way it ties its past, present, and future makes for incredible moments that continue to uplift and define the series. Sticking with RPGs, Granblue Fantasy Relink bucks the genre's usual trend of slow and long-paced stories by being tight and less bloated, but the relative brevity of its campaign doesn't compromise on the quality of its storytelling. Its mobile game origins doesn't always translate well, and Granblue Fantasy Relink feels a little thin in some aspects, but questing with friends in multiplayer is very exciting, even if the lack of crossplay is disappointing.
I sorta wish that it could go on forever and ever.
It may take place at the bottom of the ocean on a distant alien planet, but Harold Halibut's story is an entirely human one, both in terms of its carefully handmade environments and its strong emphasis on empathy towards its eccentric cast of characters. While we wish there was a little more interactivity to be found throughout its subaquatic setting, and Harold's shuffle and run could have been boosted to a sprint to reduce the time spent repeatedly schlepping from one end of its levels to the other, you'll nonetheless remain captivated by its whimsical quest to unite his community and explore the spectacular surroundings of his sunken home. Harold Halibut is a wholesome, handcrafted adventure with plenty of heart. Homeworld 3's campaign goes out of its way to change up the style of missions, as Imogen Sajet seeks out a missing Hygaran fleet and faces an unhinged enemy. Close quarter scenarios have you guiding dozens of ships through eye-catching gauntlets of asteroids and enormous space stations, and the dogfights and capital ship slugfests that play out are a sight to behold. Its multiplayer is a little bare bones, but there's a ton of immediate thrills and long-term potential in the 3-player mode wargames, thanks to its randomized upgrades that allow co-op partners to specialize their fleets to concentrate on taking down different types of threats and handle anything that might come their way.
My name is Imogen Sajet. I am Fleet Command.
Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess is an exciting action strategy hybrid that boasts a satisfying day-night structure that'll leave you losing track of time as you search for that one more thing. Base management can sometimes feel a bit like busy work, and it's not the most challenging game around, but the strategy it demands is satisfying, and its interesting enemy designs and quiet but effective storytelling are something that sticks with you. Last Epoch is an impressive time-bending action RPG that combines rich customization with modern action. Mechanically, it's an important stepping stone between Diablo and Path of Exile, but competently stands on its own merits thanks to a flurry of unique, intertwining systems and a strong endgame that makes it difficult to resist pouring an entire weekend into its endless loops. Just don't let its poorly told story or the handful of bugs discourage you from seeing this adventure through to the end of time. With a fresh cast of characters joined by a handful of familiar faces, The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak is an exciting new start for the series. Indeed, it's a great place for new fans to jump in, and also rewards veteran players for returning. Daybreak's updated hybrid battle system has a few kinks that need working out with its real-time elements, but enhanced movement options and other impressive tweaks makes the turn-based aspects better than ever. Wrap that up in an engaging story full of political drama and a compelling new setting, and Daybreak is exactly what the Trail series needed to reach new heights.
This does appear to be what the bosses asked for.
It looks authentic to me too.
This ain't no knockoff. It's the real thing.
With its substantially enhanced graphics and more flexible twin-stick control setup, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is undoubtedly the definitive version of Luigi's second apparition-filled adventure. If you're a newcomer to the series, or perhaps you only came on board with Luigi's Mansion 3 and are working your way backwards, then there's plenty of ghost-busting and puzzle-solving fun for you to find in Luigi's Mansion 2 HD's 5 haunted houses. However, if you're a fan of the original Nintendo 3DS's version and you are hoping for more dramatic gameplay changes or additions, then you might be a touch disappointed. What's more, playing this remaster in the wake of the third game may put its limitations in an unfavorable light. All told through, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is a great installment in Nintendo's Spectre Snaring series, even if it's not the best one you can play on the Switch. MLB The Show 24 continues to push the envelope for what a baseball sim can be by adding a deep respect for the history of the sport on top of its already excellent gameplay. The addition of women and Road to the Show, as well as the Negro Leagues, emphasizes Sony San Diego's commitment to the idea that baseball is for everyone. It's the most comprehensive baseball game yet, even if it does have a somewhat lackluster story mode. Once Human is a lot of fun, with survival crafting that is simple and accessible, but still rewarding to dig into. Building a house is amusing, even if pieces aren't always cooperative about snapping together in the right orientation. And while the combat is generally pretty basic, the grotesque weirdness of the monsters more than makes up for that, especially when you get a menagerie of weird little creatures of your own to fight with. Once Human would benefit from more creative quests and a flatter difficulty curve, but you'll still have a great time with it. Palworld is one of the surprise hits of the year, and even in its early access state, it's amusingly irreverent, has a surprising amount of content and deep survival mechanics, and is absurdly difficult to put down. It's impossible to overlook just how shamelessly it takes ideas and designs from Pokemon, it's got some unsurprising bugs and performance issues, and the work of keeping your base's supplies topped off needs a little retuning. But when you're riding on the back of a flying dragon while shooting a blue duck with an assault rifle, most of those blemishes wash away entirely. Yeah, we know you're still desperate for the Sands of Time remake, but Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown captures not only what made the series so good, but it irons out a lot of the little issues that plagued the 3D games in the series by opting for a 2D perspective, and owning it. It's a superb, traditional Metroidvania, sticking with tried and true elements of the genre, but executing on them with precision. The story feels a bit jumbled at times, but it's the fast and fun combat system, the tight and satisfying controls, and the stylish look and feel that elevate Sargon's journey and make The Lost Crown a worthy successor to the best of the Prince of Persia legacy. Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 delivers a spellbinding adventure packed with cinematic spectacle and story surprises that maintains a surging sense of forward momentum and never wastes a second of its slender runtime. Its combat manages to feel consistently intimidating and immediate despite its mechanical simplicity, and its perspective-based puzzles regularly scratch cerebral itches even though they're largely rehash or rework concepts from Senua's previous story. Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 is a journey as brutal as it is beautiful, delivered with hardware-pushing visuals and persistently absorbing audio, and is another Viking-worthy feast for the senses that meets the high bar set by its predecessor, even if it never really manages to clear it. Vengeance doesn't necessarily make drastic improvements over the original Shin Megami Tensei 5, but the new twists, fresh content, and quality of life upgrades are great additions. What's more, the storyline and Vengeance exclusive are, in our opinion, marginally better than the original. There's never been a better time to play this hard-nosed RPG, if not for its satisfying turn-based combat, then for its masterful execution of a uniquely demonic world. Splatoon 3 already has excellent weapon variety and intense combat, so it's a perfect fit for a roguelike game mode like Side Order. Honestly, it's some of the best fun you can have with Splatoon thanks to outstanding new enemies and powerful new abilities. And while it does occasionally stumble when implementing its roguelike elements, leading to repetitive boss fights and poor pacing, this DLC is still a blast. Stargate Timekeepers is a challenging and enjoyable stealth tactics game that lovingly plays homage to the classic television series that inspired it. The story and characters could do with a little more depth, and there are some issues with enemy behavior, and missing keyboard shortcuts that could use a bit more polish. But if you love Stargate, and let's face it, if you do, you're not going to get a new TV fix anytime soon, then you'll love this.
I want to hear this. Let her rip. Nice shot. Go team.
SteamWorld Heist 2's charming adventure refines the original game's clever turn-based combat with a flexible mix-and-match class system and handmade maps that are built around using teamwork to accomplish their objectives and escape unscathed. On top of that, it serves up a light and entertaining real-time nautical exploration game as a palate cleanser between battles, and swapping between them helps things stay fresh for more than twice the first game's 15-hour length. It's occasionally mired in grinding to unlock the next area, and the skill system will make you waste a lot of XP if you don't know what's coming. But there's no shortage of loot, amusingly off-kilter robot characters, and fantastic original folksy music along the way. Who'd have thought we'll be talking about a new Super Monkey Ball in 2024? But here we are. What's more, Banana Rumble is a brilliant return to form with a set of 200 fantastic courses that range from delightfully charming to devilishly challenging, backed up by tight mechanics and predictable physics that put you in total control of the monkey's fate. This isn't just a cover album of Monkey Ball's greatest hits though, as the new spin dash ability is a genius evolution of the franchise's core ideas, and smartly implemented online play adds fresh layers of cooperation and strategy. The underwhelming and forgettable battle mode is Banana Rumble's biggest disappointment, but the sheer amount of optional objectives and replayability found in its adventure mode make it easy to ignore. It doesn't quite reach the heights of the amazing GameCube originals, but Banana Rumble is easily the best Super Monkey Ball game in over 20 years. Tactical Breach Wizards is a turn-based tactics game, packed with humor and character-focused missions, each of which is filled with lots of things to fiddle with and not a lot of space to do it in. It's a little on the easy side, but that's no bad thing, and means you can get creative with the loadouts on each unit and possible combos between teams. Wrap that up in a vibrant and weird world with some truly incredible writing, and it's hard not to get entranced by its spell. The Thaumaturge is a slow, text-heavy caper that is often curious and sometimes captivating, weaving revolutionary labor politics and mysticism together to create a unique and charming piece of historical science fiction. It is Eurojank through and through, filled with crisscrossing systems like gathering observations, Thaumaturge abilities, and combat that are all fun and engaging despite the sometimes hitchy controls, clunky conversations, and odd voiceovers that make the journey a bumpy one. But if a little jank didn't stop you enjoying RPGs like Vampire or The Witcher, you'll be well equipped for the otherwise exciting Ghost Story. Previously, Turnip Boy committed tax evasion. Now Turnip Boy is robbing a bank. And while it's not much longer than its predecessor and has similar pacing problems toward the end, this sequel has gotten a huge overhaul for the better. It's changed genres from a dungeon crawler to an action roguelite, with massive improvements to the combat that help make that switch work. It has more quests to complete, more jokes to laugh at, and more secrets to uncover, but still holds on to what made its predecessor so charming. WWE 2K24 is clear proof that 2K and Visual Concepts have hit their stride making great wrestling games. While not drastically different from previous games, there are enough new little features added to every inch of this iteration that make it well worth climbing back into the ring. It still has flaws. Showcase mode hasn't really changed much, My Rise needs a consistent tone and pacing, and only the biggest superstars benefit from the high visual bar the game has to offer, with new wrestlers falling slightly short. But even with those lingering annoyances, WWE 2K24 puts an impressive cap on a 3-year run of great wrestling games. By leaning into early 2000s nostalgia and blending it with a stylish vision for the future, Zenless Zone Zero crafts an inimitable world that is easy to get invested in. Exploring New Eridu and getting to know its charming cast, both in and out of combat, is a thrilling ride that'll keep you hooked for hours on end. It's not as deep as many of its gameplay inspirations, and momentum-killing hacking puzzles sometimes sour the mood, but with exhilarating, approachable combat and so many extracurricular activities to take care of, it's easy to get swept up in Zenless Zone Zero.
Thank you for your patience.
Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2 is a terrific third-person shooter with a compelling story, loads of weapons that are a blast to use, and a healthy variety of enemies to use them on. It once again borrows many of the ideas from the Gears of War series, but they're good ideas, and Space Marine 2 does a fine job of making them its own. And while the Operations PvE mode that accompanies it doesn't currently offer enough to keep you coming back, the deep customization options for your Space Marine do look promising if it's supported as planned. With you eviscerating aliens on planets as pretty as these, it's hard not to leave satisfied.
People of the city, your council has voted.
Thanks to a ground-up rethinking of its Ice Age city builder mechanics, Frostpunk 2's larger scale is less intimate but more socially and politically complex than the original. Building up multiple colonies, researching technologies, and passing laws is quite the act of plate spinning. Just about anything you do is bound to make one of your city's factions angry at you, and a powerful storm can literally and figuratively freeze your whole economy. This is a city-building sequel that might have lost some of the intimacy of the original by thinking bigger, but what it's gained through its ambitious philosophy of reinvention rather than iteration means you can play it immediately after the original and not feel like you've done most of this before.
Steward, build us a better home.
A home for everyone!
Now we shift onto the games that scored a 9, beginning with the most recent to be called amazing. Satisfactory is the best automation game ever made, and we seriously can't recommend it enough. Every moment of the 130 hours plus it took to build messy conveyor belt disasters and delightfully efficient factories was engaging, ridiculous, and an absolute blast with friends. Exploring this gorgeous, bespoke world in search of secrets and resources serves as a fantastic change of pace from constructing assembly lines, even when combat doesn't offer much more than a few generic aliens to shoot at while doing so. It's a drag that Satisfactory's insatiable appetite for electronics also results in regular technical annoyances, but none of them come close to souring this stellar factory builder. The War Within is the best World of Warcraft has been on all fronts in many years, and possibly ever. The writing is strong, the gameplay is strong, and the music and zone design are exceptional even by Blizzard standards. The endgame loop feels good and offers tons of satisfying ways to progress, including more difficult and rewarding solo content than ever. The level 80 experience has some wonky tuning and annoying bugs, but it's likely Blizzard will get that ironed out in due time. Somehow, this 2-decade-old MMO feels fresh and thrilling again.
You needed time. We stayed away. But time by itself heals nothing.
Astrobot will make you smile from beginning to end and is a collection of endlessly inventive levels and fantastically fun abilities. delivering joy in spades and never once becoming even remotely dull or repetitive. While you don't need a long history with Sony systems to enjoy it, it is especially a delight for those with a piece of PlayStation in their heart, as a treasure trove full of playable nostalgia awaits. Taking the PS5 marketing mantra that play has no limits more seriously than you'll expect, Team Asobi have crafted a mascot platformer that goes near enough toe-to-toe with Nintendo's best efforts. And that's about as high as a compliment as we can give it. "1000 Cross Resist" is a revolution in storytelling, creating a complex and rich fiction that's beautifully written and spectacularly visualized. It paints a beautifully messy, often cruel and brutally honest picture of who we are, and it's an invitation to see a deeply personal and mature reflection of the Asian diaspora, dissecting the immigrant experience to show something much greater than simple representation. This sci-fi adventure is profound without ever being pretentious, unapologetically sentimental without excess, and bittersweet in intimate moments without losing sight of its radical politics. 1000 Cross Resist is a revolution in storytelling, and in turn, one that shows us what it takes to shape our future. Animal Well is a veritable feast of brain teasers that's far more concerned with twisting your mind into knots than any grueling platforming challenges. It's lovely to look at thanks to its gorgeous pixel art and dynamic lighting, and an excellent use of haptics and well-tuned physics systems makes it fun to touch too. Animal Well's steadily unlocked toy box of tools thoroughly rewards play, curiosity, and experimentation for hours upon hours after the credits roll. Though that late game maze of mind teasers might grate once in a while if you're reluctant to ask for help, the massive onion of Animal Well's secrets remains dense, clever, and thrilling, even when you've peeled back as many layers as you think you possibly can, and then peeled a few more beyond that. Balatro is remarkably approachable, with complex systems waiting for those willing to lose themselves to it, and it successfully assembles the infinitely fun gameplay loop that every great roguelike sets out to create. It takes the fundamentally simple nature of poker's scoring hands and shuffles and deep mechanics that don't feel like a chore to learn, but are always thrilling to exploit. It's a deck builder of endlessly satisfying proportions, and is the sort of fun that threatens to derail whole weekend plans as you stay awake far too late staring into the eyes of a jester tempting you in for just one more run. Destiny 2's potential was clear from the first time we blasted through the Red War 7 years ago, but Bungie never actually realized much of that potential until the final shape. This final expansion story largely succeeds at delivering a satisfying ending. The raid is brutal and epic. The prismatic subclasses breathe fresh life into combat, and the new enemy faction adds some much needed variety to the things you'll spend hours shooting in the face. None of that makes Destiny's avalanche of confusing RPG systems, currencies, and storylines any easier to digest, but for the first time in a long while, we can wholeheartedly recommend pushing through that darkness because there's now a bright and beaming light at the end of the tunnel.
They explored, they built, they thrived. Until the collapse.
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth impressively builds off what remakes set in motion as both a best-in-class action RPG full of exciting challenge and depth, and as an awe-inspiring recreation of a world that has meant so much to so many for so long. Even after 80 plus hours to finish the main story and complete a decent chunk of side quests and optional activities, there's still much to do, making this pivotal section of the original feel absolutely massive. Mini-games, side quests, and other enticing diversions fill the spaces of its vast and sprawling regions, painting a new and more vivid picture of those familiar locations. But more than just being filled with things to do, Rebirth is often a powerful representation of Final Fantasy VII's most memorable qualities. It does fumble the ending, getting caught up in a mess of multiple twisting timelines, but new moments and the overarching journey manage to evoke a deeper sense of reflection in spite of that. Even though Hades 2 is still in early access, it feels impossibly huge and unbelievably polished by any standard. New protagonist Mel is awesome, and the new tweaks to the combat and progression are excellent. And already it's so feature-packed with twice the content of the first. It is clearly still a work in progress. There are some placeholder art assets and still more weapon aspects to come, including one missing from the arsenal of the 6. There's currently no proper story ending either, but even with all that's currently missing, what's in Hades 2 right now out of the gate is astounding, and the thought of more coming on the way is a tantalizing treat.
Now go. Death to Kronos.
Death to Kronos.
Helldivers 2 has to be the surprise hit of 2024. It is the rare modern multiplayer game that does almost everything right. It gives you a ton of freedom, feels fantastic to play, and has a smart progression system that doesn't nickel and dime you or rely too much on a paid battle pass. It manages to keep its missions fresh by introducing a ton of enemies, modifiers, and objectives, and varying them in interesting ways. There are a few matchmaking and performance issues, and you can only go so far by yourself or with random players. But if you've got a solid squad, it's an incredible time, and certainly one of the most fun multiplayer shooters in years. Sprawling, enthralling, and packed with dynamic brawling, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth isn't just the best turn-based Like a Dragon game, it's one of the greatest games in the entire series. Its overhauled combat system injects flexibility and flash into every one of its turns. Its difficulty curve has been pruned of nasty spikes to remove the need for repetitive grinding, and its spectacular Hawaiian setting is crammed with enough enjoyable activities to overload even the most ambitious of holiday itineraries. A compelling, country-hopping crime story will keep you on the hook like a freshly lured barracuda for the 50 hours it takes to complete, and the vibrant new job classes and unique combat arenas ensure that the fighting continue to feel fresh. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a standout puzzler with an enticing story, clever riddles, and a perfectly eerie vibe. Exploring its forlorn manor feels both familiar and novel, and the gameplay, holding onto playing cards and letters and other objects in the hopes that they'll help decode a lock or solve some mystery down the line, is right at home with the best of the classic point-and-click adventure game genre. But the lovely, lo-fi presentation, eerie story, and creative puzzles are all impressively fresh. An unwavering dedication to being a one-button game adds some unnecessary annoyances, but it doesn't stop it from being a captivating journey just the same. Paper Mario returns to its RPG roots with an amazingly loyal and visually dazzling remake of the 1,000-Year Door. Everything fans have been begging Nintendo to bring back is here, including a delightfully varied turn-based battle system with satisfying real-time elements and unique, lovable party members who are essential to both the story and gameplay. Rogueport and its surrounding areas are bursting with personality thanks to writing that's just as sharp and funny today as it was in 2004, and it introduces a bunch of modern improvements that streamline the original's backtracking issues, making it the best way to experience Mario's quest to gather the crystal stars. A stellar visual overhaul and countless small changes help make Persona 3 Reload a more fully realized version of the original beloved RPG. Although it's still dated in some respects, quality of life improvements and new features refresh its exciting turn-based combat and adds depth to its touching story moments. Persona 3 Reload tells a powerful, timeless story of tragedy and hope with sharp emotional sincerity, aided by an incredible new voice cast that embodies these unforgettable characters and an endearing soundtrack. Sons of the Forest takes everything its predecessor did well and does it all a bit better. Exploring its huge, beautiful but deadly island through the changing seasons is a treat by itself. Plus, the new base building mechanics are easy to use and are surprisingly compelling, and you'll find yourself crafting away for days without touching the main story. The enemies are smarter and more unsettling, the combat has been thoughtfully improved, and the technical polish that's been added since its early access release round out what is one of the best open world survival crafting games ever.
Get down, son!
Tekken 8 is an amazing new entry in the long-running series, offering up interesting tweaks to its classic fighting systems, a full suite of fun offline modes, great new characters, incredible training tools, and a vastly improved online experience. By honoring its legacy, but continuing to move forward, Tekken 8 manages to stand out as something special. Unicorn Overlord is a visual delight brimming with creativity, and an absolute must-play for any fan of strategy RPGs. Its tactical combat system is unique and complex while also being easy to understand, expertly blending mechanics from many of its peers with smart new additions of its own. The interesting terrain across the continent of Feveriff makes every fight feel unique, with some of the best map gimmicks seen in any strategy RPG. Since the campaign is told through the eyes of a diverse and creative cast, its trope-filled fantasy story is elevated in a way more traditional storytelling style doesn't manage, and the shorter, more personal stories work wonderfully to support a loop of exploration and liberation, which will have you begging to see one more tale told, one more town rebuilt, and one more battle fought. V Rising's fall release benefits from a much needed layer of polish compared to its early access release, which helps cement its place as one of the best ARPGs of 2024. The boss designs are fantastic and the combat is challenging, and the loop of steering clear of the killing rays of the sun and topping up your dwindling blood supply is an effective and evocative way of selling the vampire fantasy. There's a huge amount of customization available when setting up your own private server too, practically eliminating the need to do chores that are timed to real-world days in a way that only really makes sense for playing with a larger clan. So do yourself a favor and sink your teeth into one of the best ARPGs, and one of the best vampire games in general of this moonlit age.
Rise from the shadows. Their blood will become our power.
With all of the nines covered off, we turn our attention to the ultimate accolade. The game's deemed a masterpiece by scoring a 10. In 2023, an incredible 6 games were given IGN's highest score, including Baldur's Gate 3, and the game that went on to become IGN's Game of the Year, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. But so far in 2024, only one game has been awarded 10 out of 10. From Software says Shadow of the Erdtree is the only expansion Elden Ring will get, so we're thankful it's hard to imagine a better DLC than this. Providing you're not expecting to do anything radically outside the box, everything we loved about the original has been condensed into an incredibly tight package, one that's the size of many standalone games all on its own. Erdtree is absolutely jam-packed with secrets, valuable treasures, challenging boss battles, and horrific monstrosities to face off against, as well as cool new weapons, spells, ashes of war, spirit ashes, talismans, and more to play around with, and use to find even more novel ways to tackle its memorably brutal battles. Throw in some very interesting lore revelations, not to mention the same spectacular visual design and stellar music that accompanies its larger-than-life bosses, and you've got what is certainly one of the best DLC expansions ever made. Those are the best games of 2024 so far. Although fewer games have been awarded a 10 compared to the previous year, it's still been a stellar year for new releases. Plus, we have a jam-packed run-up to the holidays to look forward to. So, for more videos like this one, make sure to check out the biggest games still to come in the fall of 2024, and for everything else, you're already in the right place with IGN.